Good morning, everyone. Welcome to Thailand Pavilion. And today we very honored to have two of the honored speakers with us at the pavilion. And today we are talking about decarbonization, the food systems. And food system is very big things, of course, for our nation. And today I have Mr. Adams from Thai Union. Of course, we as a Thai people, we all know Thai Union, the biggest exporter for the seafood around the world from our nation. And one of my great friends from the TED Network and also related to the alternative protein, advocate this around the world, Mr. Bruce. Not to further ado, can I have both of you talk about who you are, what you're doing here, and what you advocate for at COP28 briefly before starting the presentation. Can I start with Mr. Adam first? Yes.
Sure. So good morning, everyone. My name is Adam Brennan. I'm the Chief Sustainability Officer for Thai Union Group. As just mentioned, we're one of the largest seafood producers in the world. We have a significant business in ambient tuna, but also frozen shrimp as well as pet food, and increasingly looking at other emerging areas such as alternative proteins as well. So this is my first COP event. I'm really here to, help promote the role that I believe blue foods can play in decarbonizing our global food supply chain, but also to introduce our new Sea Change 2030 strategy, which we believe is a vision for the seafood industry as we look at redefining what leadership looks like in this space. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Adams, and welcome. Bruce.
And my name is Bruce Friedrich. I'm the president and founder of the Good Food Institute. The Good Food Institute works with Thai Union and with the Thai government and Thai scientists, as well as people around the world. Our Southeast Asia base is in Singapore, but 2 of our 15 team members are Thai. I had the pleasure of visiting Thailand in June and meeting with Thai Union and CP Foods and various government and science ministries in Thailand. We are at COP advocating that we think about the entire idea of producing meat in a new way, including seafood. So Thai Union has been a leader in this. Thailand as a government has been a leader in this. And I'll talk a little bit more about it in my presentation, but talking about decarbonizing this food supply, talking about what would it look like to give consumers exactly what they love about meat and seafood, but using other technologies, so cell cultivation, plant-based, and then there is a direct blue food involved, which is algae, which is just an insanely efficient and low-carbon way of supplying protein and calories.
Oh my gosh, this is a very exciting topic about food and the future of the food. So, not further ado, can I have both of you present for around 15 minutes? And of course, there's an audience from Thailand and all around our network from the Zoom as well. So, yes, Mr. Adam, please enlighten us.
Good. So good morning to everyone again. So I want to take the next 15 minutes or so and talk to you about our sustainability journey so far, and then also the direction that we want to be heading in as we help to redefine what the seafood industry should be doing as it relates to sustainability. And then obviously I'm going to be focusing specifically on some of the work we plan to do with climate change. So just to briefly talk about our journey to date, we are obviously in a fairly high-risk industry. As such, we've been working on sustainability already for quite a long time. We introduced our first sustainability strategy known as Sea Change back in 2016. And within that strategy, we've really been focusing on 2 areas. The first is above the water, really looking at all of the vessels that are in our supply chain and the social and labor conditions on board those vessels. and then looking underneath the water as we look at how we drive our sourcing and procurement for more responsible fisheries. So those have been some of the two predominant focuses to date. And through much of that work, we're very happy with some of the progress that we've made. We are currently ranked number 1 on the Seafood Stewardship Index, which is an index conducted by the World Benchmarking Alliance that really assesses a multitude of sustainability issues as it relates to sustainability in seafood. And then we're also ranked number 1 on the Dow Jones Sustainability Index, and this is in their global food category. So this is amongst some of the biggest players in the food industry around the world, and we're very happy, to have made significant progress in this area. But obviously, to be a leader in sustainability is not a stagnant term. It's something that we constantly need to challenge ourselves. What does it mean to be a leader in this space? And that's really what our new strategy is aiming to do. So with our new 2030 strategy, this is our sustainability plan to help deliver and help to reshape the seafood industry by providing unified solutions for both people and planet. This strategy was launched a couple of months ago, and when we launched, we didn't want this to just be yet another sustainability strategy that is out there in the industry. We wanted to make sure that it has the credibility for its implementation. And a big part of that credibility comes with the financial resources that we're going to be dedicating to sustainability over the next few years. And so when we launched, we actually ring-fenced all of our net profit from 2022 towards the implementation of Sea Change 2030. So this just reiterates the importance of sustainability from the management at Thai Union as we go through this journey and implement some of these goals. Now, to break apart the strategy for you, there are 2 thematic pillars. The first is for our people. The people have been at the heart of our strategy since 2016 when we first introduced it, and will continue to be at the heart of our new strategy going forwards. But then on the other side, we've also got our planet. And this is where we want to be playing a much more proactive role as one of the largest seafood companies in the world to protect and mitigate some of the risks associated with the climate and with the biodiversity crisis. Underneath these 2 thematic pillars are 5 future outcomes. So social and labour, as I mentioned, is critical for us as a seafood company to make sure that all of those workers in the supply chain are protected and safeguarded. Thai Union doesn't own or operate any vessels ourselves, so we work with our supply chain, cascading requirements down and making sure that these expectations are being met. Health and wellness is critical. Obviously, being in the food industry and particularly seafood, we believe that there is a significant role for seafood and other blue foods in providing healthy, nutritious protein and help address the food security issue. On the planet side, we have climate change, which I think needs no introduction to this audience. I'll talk about some of our goals related to climate change in a moment. Obviously, biodiversity has now emerged amongst the shadows of climate change as its own global threat. For Thai Union, we've been working on biodiversity topics already since 2016. Obviously, we are reliant on the health of our world's oceans. We are reliant on healthy fish stocks. And so we've been working on addressing many biodiversity issues since we've been moving more of our fisheries towards more responsible practices. And then lastly, on the circularity side, making sure that our own operations are supporting the circular economy. So those are the 5 future outcomes. And then underneath this are 11 interconnected commitments. And what you can see here on the screen is basically every material impact from both the social and
What we now know to be true from the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, as well as multiple peer review scientific publications, is that meeting Paris Climate Agreement goals, even meeting 2.0, meeting 1.5, even if we stay where we are right now, meeting 1.5 is going to be impossible. If we go up, it's going to be even more impossible. And the reason for that is that it is inefficient and carbon intensive to funnel crops through animals, essentially. And about 20% of all climate change is attributable to industrial animal agriculture. If we can shift to using plants or shift to cell cultivation, we can create a fraction of that. But what we also know to be true is that people really like the taste of meat. It's delicious, it's reasonably priced, and as developing countries develop, inevitably, inexorably, people eat more meat. So we need a global way of thinking about this problem with innovation, and it's not going to be tell everybody to eat less meat. We've been trying to do that for 50 years, and it has not worked. At the Good Food Institute, what we work on, what we focus on, is figuring out how to replicate the exact same meat experience using plants. So what we know to be true is that meat is made up of fats, proteins, minerals, and water. Plants also, sorry, that's what meat is made up of. Plants also have fats, proteins, minerals, and water. And until recently, the idea of veggie burgers was take the waste product of the soy oil industry or take the waste product of the bread and pasta industry, the protein, cram it together, and force vegetarians to eat it. The update on that is let's actually hire tissue engineers and meat scientists and plant biologists and biotechnology experts and figure out how to create something that gives you the exact same experience when you are eating it, but at a lower price. And you can do that with plants, and you can also do that with cell cultivation. So cell cultivation analogizes to growing a plant from a seed or a cutting. So we all know that you can take a seed from a plant or a cutting from a plant, bathe the seed or the cutting in nutrients, and it will grow into an entire plant. You can do that with a small sampling of cells from a cow or a pig or a fish or a chicken. Take a small sampling of cells, bathe the cells in nutrients, and it will grow into an entire that kind of meat. So that's what GFI works on. We work on plant-based meat. We work on cultivated meat. As Adam mentioned, Thai Union is doing some really pioneering work in alternative proteins. There's also stuff happening at the National Science and Technology Institute in Thailand. Thailand is also really leading in doing the regulatory review of these processes, especially in cultivated meat. So Thailand has already made a lot of progress on the regulatory review and may become the third country to approve the sale of cultivated meat early next year. We're optimistic about that and some really pioneering research in your government science institute. Alternative proteins analogize, and we think they're the only thing that analogize to renewable energy and electric vehicles. So what we know to be true globally is that as the world becomes wealthier and approaches 10 billion people, it will consume more energy. So it's great to do things like energy efficient light bulbs, energy efficient buildings, but we need renewable energy as one of the tools in the toolkit. Similarly with electric vehicles, as we approach 10 billion people, as economies develop, human beings just really like passenger vehicles. So we should encourage people to walk. We should have more walkable cities. We should have phenomenal public transit. The public transit here in Dubai is excellent, by the way. But at the end of the day, people are going to drive more cars. They're going to buy more cars. They're going to drive more miles. We need electric vehicles as one of the tools in our toolkit, transitioning away from gas-powered vehicles. We think the same thing is true about alternative proteins. The world is inexorably going to eat more meat and seafood, and one of the tools in our toolkit should be alternative proteins. There is not a life cycle analysis yet that compares alternative seafood to conventional seafood, but to aquaculture or commercial fishing. But these are the life cycle analyses for plant-based meat. And they are, what they indicate is that plant-based chicken requires about a sixth the land. Cultivated chicken requires about a fourth the land. Plant-based and cultivated meat require about a 20th of the land. And all of them create significantly less climate change. GFI does have what we call our Sustainable Seafood Project, which you can learn all about at gfi.org/seafood. We have produced some papers recently looking at commercial fishing and aquaculture and alternative proteins as another tool in the toolkit. We also have this report, An Ocean of Opportunity, Plant-Based and Cultivated Seafood for Sustainable Oceans Without Sacrifice. And you can find all of that at gfi.org/seafood. A couple of extra benefits, even beyond decarbonization, of a shift toward alternative proteins. One of them is food security. This is the reason that Singapore and Israel are two of the global leaders on alternative proteins, is that if you are not feeding crops, if you're not growing crops to feed them to animals so that we can eat animals, which is an inefficient process, if you're turning those directly into plant-based meat and seafood, or you're feeding the cells directly and not keeping the animals alive, which burns off an overwhelming numbers of the calories, that will allow us to feed significantly more people. So we now globally feed north of 1.25 billion metric tons of crops to farm animals, including aquaculture fish. It's an inefficient process. It's up from 700 million metric tons just 15 years ago. And it is not a great way to produce food. We think a lot about food waste. Food waste is a big topic of conversation here at COP. In the physiology of animals, there is overwhelming food waste. So the most efficient land animal at turning crops into meat is the chicken. It takes 9 calories into a chicken to get 1 calorie back out. That's essentially 800% food waste. The second of the three co-benefits is antimicrobial resistance. Right now, globally, we feed about 70% of medically relevant antibiotics to farm animals, 70% of medically relevant antibiotics. If we double meat production by 2050, that's that many more medically relevant antibiotics. It's driving antibiotic resistance, which could spell the end of modern medicine. The UK government has said that antibiotic resistance is a more certain threat to humanity than climate change. And then the last of the co-benefits I want to mention is pandemic risk. In July of 2020, the International Livestock Research Institute, alongside CJIAR, the UN Environment Program, they released this report, Preventing the Next Pandemic. This is, so they had, I think, 13 of the world's leading zoonotic disease specialists as co-authors on the report. This is their list of the 7 most likely causes of the next pandemic. And the first one is increasing demand for animal protein, going from the tens of billions of animals who are consumed by human beings now to 70 to 100% of that by 2050. It's that many more vectors for disease. The second is unsustainable agricultural intensification. There are also huge economic benefits. And yes, Thai Union is a leader on alternative proteins for a variety of reasons, including all of the sustainability benefits, but also just huge economic benefits to this shift. One of the foremost national security think tanks in the world, the Center for Strategic and International Studies, they released a report on alternative proteins maybe 6 months ago. And they said, and it's focused on the US government, but I think it applies globally. They said that the US government should support alternative proteins to enhance economic competitiveness, and that we should do this alongside our pharmaceutical industry, clean energy technology, and advanced chips for artificial intelligence. U.S. leadership on alternative proteins could produce significant economic benefits to U.S. companies and workers. That's also true of all countries. That's also true of Thailand as well, and that's one of the reasons that we were in Thailand in June. We were there with the Bezos Earth Fund to scope Thailand and chat with folks in Thailand about the possibility of an innovation center there. This is, again, on the idea of economic benefits. So huge economic benefits of alternative proteins, just like electric vehicles and renewable energy. This is a global innovation needs assessment that was done by the Global Methane Hub and ClimateWorks Foundation. They looked at, and it's called Global Innovation Needs Assessment for Agricultural Methane Reduction. So they looked at food loss and waste, they looked at rice methane mitigation, they looked at various livestock interventions, and they looked at alternative proteins. And they found that the gigatonnage of carbon that could be decreased by shifting toward a strong alternative protein policy rivaled livestock interventions. But the really interesting thing about it is that they said at 50% adoption, it could bring all of these interventions netted $700 billion in economic benefits. 98% of that was to alternative proteins across all of those interventions, which should make it an appealing investment for both corporations and an appealing investment for governments. So GFI, we have about 210 staff, actually more like 215 now. These are the area that GFI is actually a consortium of science think tanks, essentially. We're focused on the science of making meat from plants and cultivating meat from cells. The plurality of our team members all over the world are scientists. These are the areas that we have GFIs in. It's 6 NGOs. So GFI in India, Israel, Brazil, Asia Pacific, based out of Singapore, Europe, and the United States. We work on science, government, and industry. So science, that's obvious, building the most robust possible scientific ecosystem. Government, encouraging governments to invest in alternative proteins for the same reason they invest in all of their other important industries that are jobs creators. And then third, industry engagement with industry players, including Thai Union and others. On science and technology, we do a lot of our own research. We have 53 university chapters called the Alt Protein Project. And basically, we want to make sure that anybody who is a tissue engineer or a meat scientist or a mechanical engineer or whatever is aware of alternative proteins as a way that they could focus their talents. These are some of the university campuses where we operate. We do a lot of technical analyses. We figure out what are the white spaces, and then we figure out how to fill them. We have a research grant program, so we do actually fund about $4 million in open access science every single year. We have a competitive grant program that allows us to do that. And then we figure out what are the questions that need to be answered, and then what is the science that needs to be done to fill them, and then we fund that research. Our global battle cry, so the plurality of our team members are scientists, but how do you get the most open access science happening? Government funding is how you make that happen. So our global battle cry is that government should be funding open access science, and government should be incentivizing private sector activity. So we worked with the Biden administration in the United States on these big, bold goals for biotechnology and biomanufacturing, and they include alternative proteins. And then we pulled together a bunch of, so these are our goals: open access science, private sector incentives. This is just, again, $700 billion opportunity to play for. And companies like Thai Union, we think, are perfectly poised to really take advantage of these opportunities. And then industry engagement is the third pillar of the work that we do. We consider the industry players to be our collaborators, our friends, compatriots in this work. And we produce lots of think tank work. So we do have a alternative seafood state of the industry report, which you can find at gfi.org/seafood. And lots of other resources. This is convening. We pulled together a bunch of startups in alternative proteins, as well as Cargill Cargill CTO came to this meeting, and others with the Department of Energy, the Department of Agriculture, and the Science and Technology Office at the White House. So our Southeast Asia base of operations is in Singapore. We work very closely with the Singapore government. As a country that is dedicated to sourcing 30% of their food internally by the year 2030, alternative proteins is something that they are particularly enthusiastic about. As I mentioned, 2 of our Singapore staff are Thai, and we are also active in Thailand via our Singapore office. One of the scientists we work with. Humanity poses a threat to the stability of the planet, and that is why we are all here at COP28. We are incredibly enthusiastic about Thai Union's leadership. We're incredibly enthusiastic about Thailand's leadership. And I and GFI are incredibly grateful to be with you today. and looking forward to having a robust conversation. Thank you very much, Kach.
Thank you so much, Bruce. Can I invite Mr. Adams to back on the stage? If you have any questions, we can ask. But I do have questions. With all the food ecosystems, yeah. I'm wondering, like, talking about the seafood and things, since the temperature in the ocean is actually increasing, and I think that the sustainability in terms of the food chain is actually still very focused on the quantity of how we can produce. I'm asking about what other ecosystems related that need to support your sustainable ecosystems, and you think that's the most urgent in your report or your next plan on the Thai Union?
I mean, I think just to kind of reflect on kind of where we are from a seafood perspective, it's really only in the last kind of couple of years where the role of the oceans is becoming more and more clear in the role that it needs to play in helping to tackle the climate crisis. There's been an awful lot of attention on terrestrial impacts and interventions that are needed, but you know the high-level panel and the high-level champions on sustainable ocean just a few months ago released a report in the role that the oceans can play in actually decarbonization. You know, and so we're encouraging as much focus on this area as possible. Obviously, the oceans themselves are under threat, but they also have a significant role to play as we work towards the Paris Agreement. And then, as it relates specifically to seafood, obviously, you know, as Thai Union, we're reliant on the health of the world's oceans. You know, we need to make sure that not only are the fish stocks harvested at a biologically sustainable level, we also need to make sure that the fisheries are you know, climate resilient and have adaptation plans in place to help them deal with some of the anticipated climate change impacts that are likely to occur. And obviously tuna is a migratory species. You know, and we're very, very conscious that, you know, where we fish today and the fisherlands that we have today are going to look very, very different in the future. So we are working with some of the brightest and you know, some of the best scientists in the world to actually map those fishing grounds against anticipated changes in things like ocean temperature so that we can better understand what the interaction is going to look like. But that relationship is very, very complex and it's going to take quite a lot of work to really fully understand.
Thank you so much, Adams, and I really agree that it's such a complex equations. Like, a shrimp farm also related to the health of the mangrove, and there's so much mangrove that related to the sinking city of Bangkok and several things on. But I really appreciate that Thai unions have like stepped forward as a leader in this industry and support all the ecosystems. Can you share a little bit about the ecosystem that you support? So maybe some audience from around the world and maybe some audience here can be part of your initiative.
Sure. I mean, I think specifically, you know, you talk about shrimp farms and you talk about mangroves. You know, mangroves also have a critical role to play as we move forwards. As it relates to the seafood industry and particularly the shrimp industry, obviously a lot of the growth in the shrimp industry is in coastal areas, and in the past that has come at the expense of mangroves. You know, so we're in the process right now of mapping our mangrove supply chain against historical deforestation as it relates to mangroves. But within our new strategy, what I didn't mention earlier is that we'll also be investing $1 million every year over the next 7 years into mangrove restoration. So this will be both in Thailand, where we recently started a project, a 10-year project a couple of months ago, but also across our global supply chain as well. So, you know, these types of ecosystems are critical to you know, helping to combat and adapt to some of the impacts in climate change, but they are also extremely valuable to the local communities that often rely on some of these ecosystems as well.
Thank you so much. And yeah, I can relate with these kind of mega projects that around sea coastal erosions and dams and things that I think Thai Union can be part of the conversation. Thank you so much. Bruce, what about the good food? Asian people love meat. We eat Peking duck, we eat pigs and all these things. How can we convince the next generation of eater to actually come to the term with the good food that you mentioned, the plant-based and many more?
Yeah, I also want to just pick up on your previous question, what Adam was talking about.
Please, I'm sorry.
I liked what you said at the outset about the sort of circular nature of ecology and the importance of thinking about kind of everything and the complexity of everything. So I'll just note that in addition to the incredibly laudable work that Thai Union is doing to restore mangroves, when we're thinking about blue foods and when we're thinking about oceans as a bigger carbon sink than terrestrial soils, and then you think about land animal meat production right now. If you need 9 calories into a chicken or 11 calories into a pig or 40 calories into a cow to get 1 calorie back out, you need that much more land, you need that much more water, you also need that much more fertilizer. And these nitrogen-based fertilizers are eroding mangroves and also warming the oceans in addition to warming the atmosphere, which warms the oceans, which makes them less habitable. So there really is... there are multiple ways in which not just plant-based and cultivated seafood, but also plant-based and cultivated chicken, beef, pork can slash direct emissions, slash nitrogen runoff, which is creating dead zones in oceans and seas around the world, warming the oceans. Like, it is really kind of all interrelated. So alternative proteins have a lot to offer in that regard as well. Our central brainstorm at GFI is we're not going to convince people to stop eating the foods that they love. So we need to produce the foods that they love in this new way. So just like we're not going to convince people to consume less energy, and it would be pretty neo-colonial for the developed economies to say you don't get to use coal or you don't get to develop, which is why we need to help developing economies shift in the direction of renewable energy. We need to do the same thing here. And so this is not convince people to eat differently. This is hire the right scientists so that when somebody sits down and wants to eat one of the foods that they love, the plant-based version or the cultivated version is completely indistinguishable from the animal-based version, and nobody actually has to sacrifice. Just like when you hop in your car, people are not willing to drive a car that has an 80-mile range. So we need to create an electric vehicle that has a 500-mile range. People are not willing to drive hours and hours to charge their car. So we need a robust charging infrastructure and fast chargers. The solution is not to convince people to sacrifice on vehicles or energy consumption or meat consumption. The solution is to change energy, change the vehicles, and change the meat.
So you are creating a more delicious food, actually.
Equal or better,
yes.
But at the same or a lower price. And because
sure,
they're
yes.
so efficient, this is like, we've seen the price of solar plummet. We've seen the price of EV batteries plummet. That needs to happen in this space as well.
Yes, I think we have some questions from the audience. Can you stand up and introduce yourself?
Yeah, thank you. Ode Sander from the International Rice Research Institute. I've got a question for Adam in this case. So you identified the emissions from the fishing vessels as the main source of emissions from your seafoods. But when you mentioned the strategy to reduce that, you just said, okay, we look into alternative fuels in the mid to long term, so which I found a bit vague. Do you have any more concrete, milestones and a more concrete strategy that you could share? Thank you.
Yeah, sure. Thank you for the question. I think as I mentioned, we are.
คุณนิกมี
the first global seafood company to set a science-based target. So we, certainly in our industry, this is an emerging topic. There is no one that is really focusing on this issue yet. So number one, we're working to increase the amount of attention that the seafood industry receives. As it relates to R&D, if you look at the maritime industry, there is a huge amount of research going in to alternative fuels as it relates to our global logistics supply chain. The same level of research is not going into seafood, and that is going to take time to actually understand what technologies can be applied to fishing vessels. We can start off by looking at things like biofuels, but then as we look to other low-carbon fuel sources, it's going to take quite a long time to deploy across thousands of vessels the type of interventions that are needed. So certainly over the next few years, what we are focusing on, and maybe it all depends on how we're defining mid to long term, but certainly over the next kind of 3-4 years, what we're going to be looking at is how do we improve the catch efficiency of all of the vessels that are operating in our supply chain, and then how do we improve the fuel efficiency as well. So that's where we're going to start, and then we hope to ramp up the amount of attention that the seafood industry receives, and then we can better understand what types of technologies can fit and are suitable for some of the fishing vessels on board our supply chain. Because the vessels vary, there's different fishing gears. We've got everything from large purseaners, where maybe some technologies are suitable, but then all the way down to small pole and line vessels, where the types of technology are maybe a little bit more limited compared to what's available. The other thing that we'll also be looking at is maybe the electrification of ports as well. That is something that the maritime industry is looking at, and that is also something that we're going to be looking at as well.
Thank you. Bruce, do you have anything to... Okay. I think we got one more questions.
Hi there. My name's Nick. I'm actually part of the Thailand Pavilion, but I have a question for you, Bruce. In terms of plant-based products or plant-based food that you are producing, my experience so far about plant-based food is that it's still quite, it's not as affordable in terms of the price. Maybe it's, a bit sensitive or confidential in terms of, the cost of producing it. But then how do you make it, more affordable? Like you said, that make it cheaper so that when people buying meat per se, whether it's beef or pork, and then your substitute that tastes amazingly delicious as well. But then how do we make it more affordable in the future so that more and more people can feel more comfortable in converting from actual meat to plant-based version of it? Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, that is, so I sometimes say, and this is actually literally true, that GFI is a science think tank with 250 full-time team members. Every single person's charge is figure out how do we create a world where plant-based meat, cultivated meat, tastes the same or better and costs the same or less. So that's the focus. The reason we're optimistic about the prospects of that happening are, if the least efficient animal at turning crops into meat is the chicken, and it still takes 9 calories into a chicken to get 1 calorie back out, or I didn't even talk about this, but decarbonizing supply chains, like right now, so you have to grow 9 times as many crops, ship them to the feed mill, operate the feed mill, ship the feed to the farm, operate the farm, ship the animals to the abattoir, operate the abattoir. Like it's multiple extra stages of production and a pretty fragile chain of production to get meat to the table. So it should be eminently possible to figure out the science of creating something that from the vantage of the consumer is identical and that costs less just because it's so much more efficient. But we haven't cracked the science yet. It turns out that convincing plant proteins to behave like animal proteins is difficult. Convincing plant fats to behave like animal fats is even more difficult. And then it's a scale-up challenge. So there's a common, in manufacturing, there's something called Wright's Law, and it's sort of like Moore's Law. It says that for every increase of X percent, price will fall by Y percent. And we don't know what Wright's Law is for alternative proteins yet because we don't have the final products. and production is at such a small volume. But like one thing on plant-based meat we need to solve is plant fats that behave enough like animal fats and producing enough of them. So even if something is incredibly environmentally sustainable, if there's not a lot of it, the price is going to be really high. That's where we are with plant fats. That's also where we are with multiple ingredients in plant-based meat. And then anyway, this is a big part of what GFI is focused on, and you can go to our website and click on the science. So it's science industry policy up at the top, and if you click on science and click on plant-based meat, you'll see lots of our current thinking on precisely this question.
I have an additional question. Since we're not going to replace meat, right? But with the plant itself, it have a benefit of the fat and many nutrition. So why do we have to replace that?
Sorry, replace what? I'm sorry.
To replace the meat, the quality of the protein.
I mean, the environmental biodiversity and global health consequences of the amount of meat that we produce today are harmful. So if we're going to decarbonize, there was a report in Nature Communications a couple months ago. They said a shift to 50% plant-based meat would, on an annual basis, decrease global carbon emissions by 3.1 gigatons. That is 4 times the impact of grounding every plane on the planet. So that is like just eliminate the airline industry times 4 at a 50% shift. That is significantly more than turning every passenger vehicle in the world into an EV.
Sure.
And that's just the decreased emissions. And there's a similar story to be told around biodiversity, antimicrobial resistance, pandemic risk.
Yes.
So those are the sort of external costs of meat production reasons.
Yes.
It's also a massive economic opportunity. We've been producing meat in the same way for 12,000 years. It's inefficient.
I want to hear from Adams. What do you think about, of course, GFI Bruce initiative? How can you support in terms of the price and also the research team all over? Because in the future, we have to shift how we eat.
We do, yeah. And obviously Thai Union and GFI have been in partnership in tackling some of these emerging challenges for quite some time. We are obviously one of the largest seafood producers in the world, but our alternative protein is a new and upcoming part of our business that we are plowing more and more funding and research into. And the reason why we're doing that is, the common saying, there is only so much fish in the sea, right? Obviously, if we harvest those fisheries responsibly, we can get more and more, protein from our world's oceans. But we also know that the global population is increasing, and it's our position that no single source of protein is going to help, meet the nutritional needs of the world's population. And so that's where, the partnership with GFI is absolutely critical to us, so that we can address some of these challenges together. It's an emerging space. There's more research. There's more science that needs to go into it. But Thai Union have been quite successful in deploying some of its alternative protein products. For those of you that are based in Thailand, you can already find Zero MG, which is Thai Union's own brand, in some of the supermarkets in Thailand. Obviously, we started in shrimp, but now we're also going into other product categories as well.
So the session is very great, and we are about to end. What is your final word? Maybe 2 sentences for...
I mean, I just want to build on what Adam said quickly and just say one of the really great things about alternative proteins is it really does have a place for everybody at the table. And so there is a lot of sort of climate antipathy back and forth on a lot of issues. This is one area where obviously incumbent industry cannot get out in front of the consumer. So incumbent industry is going to have trouble selling the products if they cost too much or they don't taste good enough. But incumbent industry is poised to really win in this transition toward alternative proteins in ways that I think they have seen. So we really haven't gotten, Thai Union has been an early adopter on this and a great partner on this, but across the food industry, there's been enthusiasm for this as a concept. And that, I think, makes it maybe not unique, but certainly is one of the really big advantages of alternative proteins as a critical decarbonization strategy, and not just in the food space, but across decarbonization.
Yes.
As I said, this is like, even at 50%, this is more than completely decarbonizing transportation.
Thank you, and we wish you win, so we all win. Adams.
Thanks. Yeah, I mean, just to quickly conclude, we all know that, you know, the food supply chain is a significant driver of global greenhouse gas emissions. You know, you've seen the data. We know that blue food is a lower carbon intensive than others. But obviously, you know, I want to make sure that we're also not leaving with carbon tunnel vision. You know, climate change is extremely important, but so is social and labour, so is biodiversity. We've got to make sure that we're tackling all of these topics together. Yes, it's extremely important that we work towards decarbonising our food supply chain. Their blue foods offer a significant opportunity for the future, but those blue foods have to be sourced responsibly, and that means addressing the multitude of sustainability issues that our industry faces.
Thank you so much. And now please give big applause.